So you were all in for a treat today, everybody watching and everybody here in person. Adam is probably leading the most interesting company in Utah right now, in my opinion, and has had such an incredible tech career and such a legend. Like, I think Entrata's maybe like you don't have to confirm or deny, but probably the largest private company in the state of Utah. Like, this is a crazy, crazy monster of a company that Adam is running. So what an honor to have him here. Please give it up for Adam Edmunds, CEO of Entrata. And by the way, we want to open this up to questions sooner. So be thinking of your questions, and pepper this guy with questions. This is like a fount of knowledge you have here. Is that right? Is it fount or font?
I don't know.
As soon as I said fount, I was like, I question that. Okay, but anyways, think of your questions. Ask away. Give us an update. What's Entrata going through right now? What are you thinking about? How are you adapting to AI? Just give us like your overall thoughts.
Yeah, I've been at Entrata for almost 5 years now. Like probably most in the community. I actually worked at, it used to be called Property Solutions. I worked there during college. I met Dave, the founder, in school at BYU. Back when Garrett and I were in the accounting program together. I worked there for a couple of months. And he was actually the one that said, hey, you're pretty good at this. Maybe go start your own business. And so I went and started Silent Whistle, my first company. But and I kind of followed this company along just because I knew some people there. But when I started, when he kind of brought the idea up 5 years ago, hey, why don't you come and run this thing? I was like, yeah, that's like some cute little apartment app thing that people like pay rent. I had no idea what it had become. I think it'll be the biggest enterprise software company ever to come out of Utah. It's the amount of code that's been written, the products that we sell, and it's an industry that is easy to get passionate about. Our software helps these, property managers, apartment community managers, help people through pretty emotional parts of their life. Like moving into a new place, into a new apartment, or leaving your old apartment is usually accompanied with some emotional event, like having a baby, getting married, getting divorced. You've got a sick kid that needs treatment in a different city. So the folks that use our software and buy our software, that's actually what they're passionate about, is helping the human experience of living. They don't care about software. And so, we've built the equivalent of Salesforce.com, of NetSuite, of Checker, of Stripe, Wix. All of that is built with one purpose, and that's to serve this industry. We recently, have added quite a few AI products, so we're using AI extensively with our customers, but also internally as well. I just feel honored to be a part of it and just play a small role. It's really a fantastic business, and one thing I've felt really passionate about since I joined is I think I want to help tell the story of how cool of a business it is, because the people who built it long before I got there deserve for everybody to know, to be honest. So yeah, it's a super cool business. I love it.
Well, you've not just been a small part of it. You've been integral in the growth that we've seen over the past, 5 years in this thing. Your leadership I just can't say enough about Adam as a leader and who he is. And every day I'm hearing from people who've interacted with you, or, they're just like, you're beloved by this community, like 100% approval rating, which is super rare. Give us a sense for this Silver Lake deal. It's been a while now, but maybe for those who don't know, Silver Lake, the biggest investment fund in the world ever, of mankind, came in and made a large investment in the company. Tell us how all that went down.
Yeah, so I joined in 2020, and the goal was, hey, let's go raise a little bit of capital for the first time ever. Like, this company raised $1 million back in 2005, and that was it. And so there'd never been investors, but there had been a lot of investors that had tried to get into the business. So when I joined, it got out quickly that I was there, which meant a lot of the kind of investment community thought, like, maybe something's going to happen finally. So we never even launched a process to raise money, and I probably got 15 term sheets in the first few months. One of them just texted to me. People numbers I didn't even recognize. Although maybe the broader community didn't know what Entrata was, the investment community did. And I was lucky enough to have Ryan Smith and Todd Peterson kind of helping me through that. And they came about halfway through the process. They were like, hey, Silver Lake had just put a minority investment into Qualtrics to spin them out of SAP. And I'd heard of Silver Lake. They owned Ancestry here locally for a while. They'd done a couple of other deals, but I'd never met anybody there. But I was shocked in 24 hours of having access to our data room. They understood that business better than we did. And so I was impressed with them from the very, very beginning. We had to do kind of some creative terms that they were just totally fine to get behind. They were just super passionate about the business. And it was important. There were some other investors I really liked. So Silver Lake led that round. Dragoneer came into it. It's a firm I've known for a long time. And then Steve Young's firm, HGGC, came in. And then Ryan and Todd and Pelion, like a bunch of other investors all kind of came in. And that was in mid-2021. And then 6 or so months later, that same group of investors ended up buying the founder out. And so it's kind of the same group that's still there. And they've been just fantastic to work with. Silver Lake, and then since Silver Lake has bought out Qualtrics, so they now have a majority interest in Qualtrics as well. So Silver Lake owns the 2 biggest tech companies in Utah now, and are making a big investment into the community here.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. It's actually insane. When was Entrata founded? What year?
2003.
So it's 27 years old. Took its first and only round of funding until you came on in 2005, $1 million, probably from Nobu.
Nobu, Gary Williams, Craig Earnshaw, a couple others. But yeah, it was a really small number.
And Nobu, who nobody knows, he's like the most prolific angel investor in the history of the state of Utah. And, he's so elusive. You just don't even know. But yeah. I'm sure you've had experiences with him even with your own companies, right?
Yeah, I met Nobu. Josh James introduced Dave Bateman and I to Nobu around the same time in 2003. So he invested in my first company around the same time he invested in Entrata. He did $1 million round and I think like a $500,000 round into Omniture back in like 2002, 2003 and saved Omniture, had a huge return from that, but has since, he put money into Podium when I went there. He's got a bunch of money in MX. He was in Workfront here locally. Yeah. And his due diligence process is he just asks a few people about the entrepreneur. That's literally it. And he might take you golfing. That's it. I'm not even sure he knows what any of the businesses do that he's invested in that I've been involved with, which is all of them. But he knows how to pick them. He's a great guy too.
I don't know if I said 22 years or 27. It's 22.
22.
Yeah. As you were saying that, I think I said 27. It's 22 years old, but I want to touch on that for a second because I think Qualtrics around that same time, maybe 2002, was founded. I think obviously you had Omniture and then Domo. You had Pluralsight, which was started around that time. Where's the next generation? And you've been part of a lot of the next generation, and there is next generation. I don't want to be dismissive of that. But you were president at Podium, which is this incredible company, and we've had Weave and all that type of stuff. But it is interesting that the main dominant tech companies in the state are still those ones that were founded around that 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005 timeframe.
Yeah, I don't know if you mentioned Pluralsight, but I think they started
Pluralsight.
The same time. And I've talked about this with a number of people, and I think the reason Vivint similar. Todd started Apex back in the 90s, but that's kind of Vivint. What became Vivint was kind of early 2000s when they really started to put that together. And I think it was the lack of access to capital. They had to think more long term. And this is something I've learned by watching these companies, in particular, those you mentioned, Qualtrics, Entrata, and Vivint, and getting to know those founders. I was the type of entrepreneur that always thought in quarters and years. I'd think, think about 2026, and that was really my focus. And as I got to know some of these founders better, they think in decades, and they talk that way, but I think by 20, we have a competitor, and the investor that owns one of our competitors, they always tell me we're going to own this in 2050. I'm like, that's crazy that people think that way. I don't care. I don't know if I'll be alive in 2050. I don't care what I own in 2050. But a lot of these founders that started companies then, there was no access to capital, so they weren't building the company for an exit or for an IPO. They were just building something they were passionate about, and they didn't have cash to do it with. I've heard all those guys talk on interviews or podcasts and say, if there was money available, I would have raised, but there wasn't anything to. it was just really hard, especially in Utah back then. And so I think, it's something for everyone to consider. Like, I think they just had a inherently more long-term view when they built their businesses than probably I did and maybe current entrepreneurs do when it's easy to raise money now. It really is. You can raise money on a PowerPoint deck, like no problem.
Yeah, which is what is that good? Is that bad? What advice would you have to entrepreneurs? Is maybe the reason why we're not seeing like these next generation of monster companies because they've given up too much equity at the beginning? Like what? Give us a sense for that.
I'd say overall, yes, it's good. Like, I think it's good for the community. It's good for like employment numbers. It's part of the reason I think Utah is such a healthy state and always leading and fastest growing and whatever. But I do think it does change entrepreneurs' mindset if you give away 20% of your company before you even have a product, and then you give away another 25% when you do have a product, and then you give away another 25% when you raise your Series A. And I've done that twice. And all of a sudden, you fast forward 3 or 4 years, and you're like, sweet, I have $10 million of revenue. I own 8% of this. And so it just like the incentives aren't quite aligned to, okay, well, I guess I'll keep doing this even though I don't own very much anymore. And it's not about like, I'm not saying you shouldn't raise money, but a lot of people raise businesses to raise money. Like that's kind of the whole point. And sometimes I'll talk to entrepreneurs like, well, we're doing this, and then when we're doing our pre-seed now, and then we'll raise our seed, and then we raise our Series A. I'm like, don't even, like, who cares? Don't think about that. Think about product market fit, because until you have product market fit, none of it even matters. So I think it's just like a mindset thing, and I think probably the last few years has been healthy because capital did become a bit more limited the last few years. And venture funds had a little harder time raising money, and everyone got a little bit more skittish with putting money into the market. So maybe that was a healthy, just kind of not a reset, but maybe a little bit of a pullback into expectations that money's just always going to be there and it's always going to be at great terms. At least that's my.
Have you guys seen that show Silicon Valley? There's that great scene where he's like at a bar and like there's this founder who like took too much money. He's like, why didn't you ever just take less? He's like, nobody told me you could take less.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like this beautiful. Hey, let's start taking questions, and we'll keep the interview going as we go. But raise your hand. Who has a question for Adam? Luke, let us give you a mic before you get going, just so that people on the stream and all that stuff can hear it.
I listened to the recent podcast that you guys put out. One question I had was, you took a year off, kind of doing nothing, refocusing. How did you land in the CEO role of Entrata? You didn't just stumble upon a job listing in Indeed or wherever, KSL.
Yeah.
How did that job find you, or vice versa?
So what he's talking about, when I left Podium in early 2020, we had moved our family at the time down to San Clemente, California, and I just went down there and I was like, I don't want to work for a while. I was like physically, emotionally, spiritually, energetically bankrupt. I had nothing left to give anybody. So I went down there and just started riding my bike, learned a lot about myself. I was surprised how quickly my phone stopped ringing and I stopped getting texts. So that was a pretty tough year, like from a mental health perspective for me, to all of a sudden have nobody around calling me, and kind of going through this process of thinking like, okay, maybe I was just a buck to everybody, and maybe I was just a job to everybody. But it was really healthy for me to go through. But later on that year, I was going to start a business in the software space, selling to B2B, and my plan was I was still living in San Clemente. I came up on a trip here, and I was going to meet with kind of a bunch of the local CEOs, Ryan and Josh and Dave at Entrata was one of those, and get them to invest and promise that they'd buy the product. And Dave and I got to talking. He's like, hey, well, there's this business here, and I don't necessarily have the energy to take it to the next level, so why don't you come and do this? And my initial reaction was like, running a 2,500 person company is the last thing I want to do in my life right now. But I started talking to the team, and they didn't track a lot of the traditional SaaS metrics that I was used to, like customer acquisition metrics. But just by asking some questions to the VP of Finance and a couple of folks, I was like, I think there's a monster business sitting in here. And so it was really just the relationship I had with him that kind of got me into that, and kind of was off and running there at the end of the year of 2020. Yeah.
There was another hand I saw. There's one right here. We'll come over here next.
Thanks. Adam, you've been now on both sides of it. You've started your own business, grown it to a certain level, and then had somebody else take over and run it from there. And then you've displaced a founder and come in and taken it to that next level. Give us a little perspective on how you view both of those types of roles. Does one just resonate more with you now? You said you were about to start another new thing and take that adventure all over again. What draws you to one of those versus the other?
Good. That's a really good question. Here's what I've learned about myself. Well, so there's founders and operators. Founders are psychotic. They are micromanagers. They're obsessed with perfection and maybe emotionally unstable and willing to do anything to make their company succeed, okay? And I think that's true of the best founders that exist. And I don't mean any of those negatively, because I've always wanted to be the cool founder guy. Operators are more around the metrics and hiring and structure and team building and communication side from what I've seen. And what I learned, especially over my last two, is that I'm actually, I wanted to be the cool founder guy, but I'm actually a boring operator guy. And I started learning that at Podium, really learned it at Entrata, that's actually what I'm probably better at. I was a pretty mediocre founder because I didn't have quite the same energy or passion for the product, for how everything looked, for the way the brand was being received. I just didn't have that same drive. That now that I've worked with some of the best, I've seen how crazy they are, and I say that seriously in the most positive way possible. And I just don't have that. So I probably wouldn't start a company again in the future. This is actually what I'm better at.
So I wanted to, right here, sorry. So I wanted to go back to that. You talked about VC money and companies maybe taking too much. And I've seen some examples of that, like Canopy, for instance. A few years ago, I had a buddy that moved out from the East Coast to work for Canopy, and they had a massive layoff, laid off a ton of people. The CEO left the company. Pluralsight's another example. They're actually leaving the state of Utah. They just announced that, which is kind of unfortunate. And so I wonder if these VCs just take over too much of these small businesses. So can you be like a Bamboo HR and just run your company without having to take money?
If you can build a business without raising money, I would do it that way. And when people come and say, hey, who should I raise money from or how much, I usually answer by saying, if you're going to raise money from people you like and people that can help you. I remember when Sterling Snow was raising his round for Redo, that's kind of what I advised him on, is like, this person can probably help and this person can probably help, rather than go pitch 15 firms and find out who gives you the best terms and that's who you take it from. I've had companies that, didn't have the outcome because I didn't understand the terms I was raising on. Like, I didn't know what a participating liquidation preference was the first time I accepted one from a venture firm. And then you go sell the company and then it's like, oh, that's what a participating liquidation preference is. That sucks. So that's like, but when you're young, you don't necessarily have the network to go, text if Ryan Smith is the one you want, you might not have access to that person. But that's why I think when I started my career, coming to this kind of stuff was one of my main focuses, in addition to building my business, was to just network myself with everybody. And that's how I met people like Nobu, who was a great investor and gave really, really fair terms. And when the company was in trouble, didn't probably overreach. But I also don't blame when that happens with venture firms, or like you mentioned, Pluralsight. That's owned by the lenders. And so I don't blame what the lenders are kind of making the decisions there now. That's what happens when you raise money and you lose control over how much leverage is put on your business or how it's run or who the team is. Like, that's just kind of the road you're going down. And that's the game, though. Like, I totally get it. Like, people ask me how is Silver Lake to work with. I'm like, they're my favorite investor I've ever had, but we're performing really well. If we stop performing, like, I get it. It's not going to be quite as fun for me. So you just got to know that that's what you're getting into when you raise money from venture firms or private equity firms.
So I'm considering starting a consulting business helping small to medium-sized businesses use AI to help streamline their processes. I'm wondering if you have any advice for somebody who's just getting started, trying to get into this space. You've got experience with startups and with bigger businesses and everything. What thoughts do you have on that?
I mean, when I was starting my very first company in 2003, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anything about tech. I didn't know anything about business. So like I said, I just started going to this kind of stuff, whether it was like, that was the old UTC meetings or Mountain West Capital Group meetings, or if I just heard about some random thing, and maybe like a third of the time they were a waste, but that's where I met like Patrick Byrne was the CEO of Overstock. I met him at some random conference, and I just walked up to him, gave him my like 30-second pitch, and he said, my email is patrick@overstock.com, I'll buy your product. And then I would like network through like my uncle's brother, Dave Spafford, into people. He started Megahertz back in the 80s and 90s, and even though it was long gone, he knew some people, and he got me into like Kent Woolley at Extra Space Storage, and they bought my product. And so that's how I got going, is you just have to like, I remember I was at lunch with an advisor, and I was really early. He's like, you don't have time to be taking me to lunch. You need to get out there. Like, go work. Go find customers. Go find people who can help you. And so that's probably my main advice for someone just starting, is you've just got to, like, get out there. You're the only salesperson, so you just have to be out selling, like, from the very, very beginning.
And you're doing it. Now everybody knows what you do. Everybody check him out. Well done, man. Who else has? Yeah, let's go right here.
This is funner than when we just do a podcast. They're way more interesting than you.
Oh, yeah. I'm
Just
like, so what do you think of the Jazz, dude? Then we get lost for 45 minutes.
going back to the raising money, who to raise money from, and you said raise money from people that can help. What are the, like, what is that specifically? Is it their network? Is it their helping with talent? Like, what do you find most helpful when you say help from a VC?
Probably both of those. Like, someone who either is like well respected in the industry you're trying to that you're starting your business in. So if you're starting a software company, having like some software executives that are really well known, I think is going to be really beneficial for you. If it's a consumer brand, like if you're starting some consumer product, I would probably go try and get Jeremy Andrus to invest at Traeger. Just someone who's like seen the stuff that you're going to have to go through. And look, all those names, like you can't like get to those people all that easy, and so that's why I think it's important to kind of network around. And there's other executives that have built all those companies. Like if you're doing a consumer brand, Skull Candy was built here. There's a million people who built Skull Candy, and there's a bunch of Stance Socks people. Like you can find your way to people who've built something similar. And I'm kind of thinking about investing in like this. It's like a CRM AI product for like independent hair salon people. And that was, but my immediate thought for them is like, who can help you? Who knows that industry? Who do I know that you should go try and pitch to get money from them?
It really inspired me with your experience and your background. Is absolutely amazing. And I just would like to ask you one question. Back in the days, so now you have experience, now you have everything. Back in the days when you just graduate, what kind of, just one quote you just say to your young version of yourself? Or just one piece of advice you would say to yourself in that time?
So I got my parents sitting here, so they're making me emotional right now. I'd probably say, don't lose yourself in the process. From a young age, I learned that I had skills and talents that made people like me. And I could accomplish things that would make people like me. And so I probably became a person that was mostly focused on that, of achieving things that would make people like me. And then, you know, Clint and I talked about this in the podcast. I think one of the reasons people have midlife crises is we create these characters for different people. Yeah. Like, for my mom, I was this smart kid that all the teachers liked. My little brother's here. To my dad, he was the super athlete. Like, we all create, to your spouse, to your kids, to people at work, we create these masks or these characters. And then you get into your 30s and 40s and you're like, people like me for these things I made up. It's not actually me. And then I think that's what causes people to kind of have like a mental health crisis and kind of go through a bit of a depression or this identity crisis, because they lost track of who they are and their own authenticity. And I can tell you that's for sure what happened to me. And it's like a path that I'm going on now. It's one thing I love. My oldest son is 22 and he knows exactly who he is. Like, I'm so jealous that at 22 years old he knows who he is, because I'm 46 years old and I'm still figuring it out. So that's probably what I'd go back and talk to myself about if I could.
Thank you.
Go deeper down on that for a second around this, because we did talk about this in the podcast, but this idea that we attach our identity to our companies or what we're doing between 8 to 5 and like, well, most of it's just not 8 to 5, but you get what I'm saying. It's like we attach ourselves to these things, and that's actually not at all who we are, right? Like, I'm not Silicon Slopes. You're not Entrata or Podium or Silent Whistle or all, Merit CX. Like, that's not actually like who you are. Talk about like that journey. And I bring this up because, by the way, thank you so much for sharing what you did and with this group. I bring this up because I do believe there's a mental health crisis in our community. I think we see it a lot, too much. I think we've seen it recently even, right? Like it's, what do we do about this? And maybe it is just like sharing your experience to let people know that they're not alone in that. I mean, there can't be anybody more successful in tech and in life and in entrepreneurship than Adam Edmunds. And to hear him talk like that must be shocking to some people, right? Like, you got everything, man. Like, it's insane. Like, give us a sense for how you think about identity and how you work on not attaching yourself to the company or these labels we give ourselves.
Yeah, I don't know if I have everything figured out. Like, all I can do is share my own experience. But yeah, it's something that, so in my career, I graduated, I started my first business in college, and I go to all these events, and I start winning these awards, like, oh, I'm the Entrepreneur of the Year of BYU, and I started winning these things. And again, like, to this little 5-year-old that was always trying to prove he wasn't a loser to everybody, like, that felt really nice. And it was all, like, kind of up and up and up until my second company, it got really, really hard all of a sudden. And I was too busy comparing myself to others. I was looking at what Dave was doing at Entrata, and I was watching Ryan at Qualtrics, and I was watching Josh at Omniture and then Domo, and all these other things that seemed to be going really, really well. And meanwhile, that company was really hard. And to the point where I replaced myself as the CEO. I tinkered with the executive team so much, and nothing worked. And I remember talking to someone, I'm like, I've changed every variable in the equation except for myself. So that's like the only solution here. And like nothing would fix it. And so that's where I started to associate my identity with the badness of that, at least in my brain. It felt like a failure, which felt like I was being left out, I was being left behind, and frankly, I felt like a fraud, like a complete imposter, like I'm not actually even good at this, and I don't want anybody to find out. And then I was lucky enough that Eric and Dennis at Podium pulled me in there, and then that like got my mojo back. We went from 0 to 100 million of ARR in like 4 years. It was insane. And they brought me in like a third co-founder and just really kind of let me do my thing. But then I got the opposite problem. It was so successful. And all these people that I thought their opinion mattered so much to me started to like open up to me and talk to me and text me again. And then I leave that place, and like I told you, I was shocked how quickly my phone stopped ringing. And there's actually, if you haven't seen the documentary that Michael Phelps did with HBO, he did a documentary about Olympic athletes that go through this, that from a young age, they are trained, they have all the medical that they need, diets that they need, training that they need, 24/7, 365 for this one goal. And the second they're not useful anymore to the Olympic team, they're gone. And it's likely they all go into these deep, deep depressions. And unless you're Michael Phelps or Apollo Ono, the sponsorship money, everything disappears in one day, and they have a lot of problems. And I think the same goes for people who are in business or tech, or it could be if you're, like I see a lot of women that go through this when their kids leave. And it's like, now what am I? I'm alive for 40 more years, and I dedicated myself to these little kids, and they're gone now. Like, what do I do? So it's something I'm still working on. For me, what helps me is like, I hid my emotions like really well for a long time, which is really dangerous. That's when you get into, I think, depression type stuff. I think that's when you get into self-medicating, which can be super, super dangerous. So for me, it's about being vulnerable. It's about being honest in my relationships with how I'm doing. I have a therapist, Walter. He's a really funny guy that I talk to every week or two, and for me, those are the tools that I found. And then like exercise, like if I'm doing well, it means I'm probably biking too, and if I'm not doing well, it probably means I'm not on my bike. So those are at least the things that I try to do to, keep myself somewhat grounded. And yeah.
What do you think about the culture, Utah tech culture, but even just more broadly? Like when I go on LinkedIn now, I feel like none of us are actually posting that. It's like all our AIs are doing that. And like all of our AIs are talking to each other. And every post starts the same as like, started with a, like, I don't know, started with a bang, and then it's the sentence, and there's like another, you know what I mean? It's like everything's so awesome all the time. And the stories are like, they kind of start with like, oh, something bad might happen, but they always end with something like incredible happened. How do we, like, as a culture, maybe change this? You're not your company. You're not your company's biggest success. You're not your company's biggest failure. You're separate. You're a separate being from that person. That's not who you are. Is there anything like we as the community can do to reinforce that? Rather than the opposite, it does feel like we reinforce the opposite of that, which is like you are your company.
Yeah.
You are what you're doing. You are your biggest success or you are your biggest failure. Like when Summit does really well and Zuckerberg's on stage and there's like 30,000 people at the Salt Palace and like, it's like, oh, Clint's amazing. And then like when it's a UVU, everyone's like, oh, Clint sucks. But I'm actually like neither of those things. I'm not like the, I'm just like Clint.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So how do you like disassociate yourself from what you're actually doing? And I guess you kind of answered that, but what do you think like the community can do to reinforce that you're not those things?
I think the only thing we really can do is try and actually maintain an actual community. We probably spend, like I was talking with Walter, my therapist, about this yesterday. I have a hard time differentiating the journey from the destination, and the achievement. And like I said, I'm a person who gets a lot of value when people recognize my achievements. When it's actually, that's what kind of gets me lost in the actual journey, because I close up, I stop talking about it, I get so focused on the outcomes, and that's kind of what I feel like our culture's become too much of, is celebrating the raising money, celebrating the IPO, celebrating, the wins, and not just recognizing that everyone's on this journey together, and coming to stuff like this and just meeting people. Like, it's really hard to build a business. It's really hard to be a dad. It's really hard to put Summit on. Like, it's everything is pretty tough. And I just think a lot of us try and do it alone too much because we're so focused on that goal, because that's what, for a lot of us, I would assume a lot of people in here are wired like me. Like, it was cool when I was the CEO of the year. Like, that was cool. It took 22 years of carnage to get there. Like, I wish I had done it a little bit differently, you know what I mean? And it's something I did better in my 20s, and then I stopped doing it in my 30s, and I'm trying to start to do it again. Like, I ride my bike a lot. When I'm not doing well, if I do ride my bike, I'm by myself. And just forcing myself to get out and ride with other people is really, really helpful. So that's what I think is we've just lost that sense of community. And the only way to do that, it's not like we're gonna, celebrate and create a new award system for people who are midway through the journey having a hard time. Like that's like, we can't really do that. But coming to these kind of events and just sharing stories and having people you can talk to, I think is the best way to do that. Keep yourself from remembering, like, yeah, I'm Adam. I'm just doing my best, and I'm gonna screw up all the time. And the older I get, the more I realize, like, I don't actually know very many things. Like, at this point, I just try and have good days. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's been my experience.
What a great question, and what a tangent we went on from it. Thank you so much for sharing. Hey, raise your hand. Who else has a question for Adam? Yeah, right here. Seriously, thank you for the question, and thank you, Adam, for sharing all that.
Oh, this is my mom, everyone.
Don't I look like a tech executive? So I wanted to address the question about a quote. And I don't know if you remember the quote that you had on your very first I guess, wall, and to see how you feel about it now. I'd like to know. And the quote was, remember the main thing is the main thing. Do you remember it now?
Yeah.
Always
Yeah, I do.
remember the main thing is the main thing, and that's the main thing. And so do you still feel that, or is that now not the right approach for someone who's looking for something to inspire them?
Well, first of all, now you see where I get my crying from. Number one. No, I actually heard that quote this week. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. I think I heard that and I was like, oh yeah, like I haven't thought of that in 20 years. I think where people get lost, myself included, is you lose track of what the main thing is in your life. Like, is it being rich? Is it being, admired by people? Is it like, for me, that's what I kind of lost track of. And I think that's probably pretty common. Like I said, we kind of create these masks and you lose yourself. And you lose track of what your priorities were when you started or what your priorities were when you were a kid. Because the reality, if you asked 5-year-old Adam, here's a funny story. So if you don't know, I'm really nerdy and big into basketball cards. When I was 7, my dad took me to an old card shop in West Jordan on Redwood Road, and I remember walking in, and there was a Michael Jordan rookie card on the wall that was $50. So this would have been like 1986. And I remember looking at that thinking, that is so far out of my universe of possible outcomes in life, is to have something like that. That will never be me. And so if you showed at 5-year-old Adam Edmunds like what I've kind of done throughout my career, I wouldn't have thought any of it was possible, and yet you get to your 40s and you're like, I don't even know why I did it in the first place. And so for me, it's kind of losing track that like what I value above everything is relationships. Having a family. Like my boys are my best friends, That's actually what the main thing is for me, and you lose track of that. You lose track of it over time, and I've had to, over the last couple of years, as I've realized that, I've had to go apologize to old friends because, another one just, a few weeks ago, he was one of my best friends for years, and I hadn't talked to him in probably a decade, and I don't know why. And so for me, it's kind of had to recenter myself back to, that's always been my main thing. I took my high school best friend to lunch last week and kind of had the same conversation because I have all these people in my life that invite me to things all the time, and I say no every single time. And that's not a reflection of not wanting to go. It's a reflection of I haven't been doing super well. You know what I mean? And so for me, it's like getting the main thing back into the center, which is I just really appreciate having good people in my life. And I do. I'm really fortunate. I have a lot of good people. I grew up in a great family. I have great children that none of them have ever caused me problems. They get good grades and they go to bed on time. They're perfect. I've got a lot of really, really great friends that I've had for a long time, and I think it's easy to lose track of that because you're so worried about being on that Hall of Fame wall. You know what I mean?
Yeah, screw that Hall of Fame wall.
As we all know, not everything in life goes well. Not everything bears the fruits you want it to. I've had a lot of moments like that in my life, in my own life, where things just go off plan and don't turn out. But I believe those experiences still have value. I just also have had problems communicating that value. Do you have any advice on that?
Jeez, you guys are deep today. My life has not gone all like I planned, from a personal standpoint, frankly, or career. It's given me a lot of empathy and neither of most of my friends. The reality is we all go through a lot of stuff. I have, my sister's husband died when she was pregnant with her 4th kid. She wasn't planning on that. I have 2 good friends who had children die at Lake Powell. People who get sick, companies that just tank and nosedive. Divorce freaking sucks. That's a something that, flip a coin, half the people around us will go through. And that's just the reality. Is we're all going through really heavy stuff. There's a quote by Robin Williams that I post probably once a year saying, everybody is going through something you have no idea about. So be kind always. And I've really tried to adopt that, whether that's like bringing my road rage down a bit, smiling at people when I open the door for them. And it's given me a lot of empathy as a leader to understand that like every single person working at Entrata has a major crisis going on in their life right now that I don't know anything about. They've got a kid that just got diagnosed with autism, or they are having marital problems, or they're leaving their religion of choice and like feeling really hard, really bad about that. I have found that eventually those kind of experiences do have a lot of value. Like that's how you kind of get through some of the personal growth that we all need to go to. But like I said, probably the most value I've gotten out of them is reconnecting to people around me and having relationships that I value and trust and add value. Because trying to go through that stuff alone is, I think, when those negative experiences turn into big problems that you can find yourself in a situation where you've got yourself in danger. You're spending way too much time alone. You're doing things that you never really planned on doing. And I've had a lot of friends go through it. So like I said, I don't know, I keep coming back to like, this has just been my experience. The more open I am and relationships I keep in my life, the better I do, and the more I do find value as I go through some of the suckier things in life.
So you mentioned you believe that Entrata could be the biggest enterprise software company coming out of Utah. Qualtrics sold for $8 billion and then sold again for 12.5. I assume you're not there yet. What is it gonna take, and what do you foresee getting you there?
For the first time in my career, I'm actually not worried necessarily about the outcome. That's kind of been my mindset, is like, all right, well, Ryan did 8 and 12, so 12.1 is the new target, and that will get me on that wall. I don't care as much anymore. The reason I came to Entrata is because for the first time, it was the first company I've worked at that I thought could be a generational business. Like that building will be there in 20 years, long after I'm gone, and it will still be providing great jobs to lots of people in the state, and it'll be providing great software and solutions to our customers. And so I don't know where the end point will be for Entrata, because yes, we have investors. Eventually a liquidation event has to happen. I do think this could be a really great public business, so maybe that's where we take it. But my focus has been build a really, really great team, have really great employees, really great products, and just, you still have to grow. Like you can't just be like, oh, like don't worry about it, it'll figure itself out. Like no, we're really crazy about our revenue metrics and our profitability metrics, our customer acquisition costs, all that kind of stuff. But I'm doing it just more of like, make sure the system's built and the processes are in place. So if I disappeared tomorrow, it is fine, and it'll go on just fine by itself. And whatever that outcome is, and the reality is there'll probably be several outcomes. Like you mentioned Qualtrics, like they've had kind of several different versions of a financial outcome. And this business is, but like I said, it's one that I know in a couple decades is still going to be sitting up there on the hill and providing a lot of value to the community.
Which is super rare, right? Like I'm trying to think of like companies that have done that. That's more rare than even the enormous exit.
Yeah, yes.
Like is to build a generational
you
company.
Think of Novell was worth $10 billion in the 90s, gone.
Gone.
Like poof, WordPerfect, gone. Omniture is one that is. That Adobe building is Omniture. Like that's the first generational company I actually think we built here.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think like Overstock maybe, but now like that
It's like
one's
25 years old. It's still there. Ancestry's still around. That's like a 25-year-old business. So I do think we have some others. I think Qualtrics will be one. I think Entrata will be one. And you and I have talked about this. You asked me a question a couple years ago, like what's the next step for Silicon Slopes? And I think it's this. I think it's building platform companies that last decades and generations. And rather than being the community that builds companies and we sell out to Silicon Valley, let's go buy out some of the Silicon Valley startups and bring them here. I think we have some of those being built now.
I think you've posted about this publicly, so I'll ask. You share this poem with like your friends and family. I got one this if, like the super. Tell us about why is that so important to you? And I know a lot of us have gotten this from you, and it's meant a lot to us.
So the poem "If" by Rudyard Kipling, I hadn't seen that until a few years ago. And if you haven't read that, just look it up. It's 140 years old, I think. And it's just talking about, so the ending phrase is, if you can become all of these things and master all of these traits, yours is the world and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man or a woman or an adult or whatever. But basically, and it just kind of goes through the highs and lows of life. Like, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, that's like the first part of my favorite phrase. So yeah, there's times you'll go through life where you're doubted and you're judged, and it might not necessarily be fair. But the second part of that phrase is, but you can make allowance for their doubting too. That's like a new personality trait I'm trying to master, because for me, if I ever felt doubted, I was pissed. I did not want to be doubted. I hate when people question my integrity. And I've had to, any CEO, anyone that's in the public eye, Reddit threads get started about you. Like, people say stuff, like people chime in on Instagram and doubt your integrity. And for me, that poem has a really special meaning, because it's talking about those kind of things. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. The other phrase I really love from that is, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. And kind of getting back to I wasn't the difficulty of allegiance, and I wasn't the coolness of Podium or Entrata either. Recognizing that triumph and disaster are both imposters. So those are a couple. I love that. I read that poem all the time now, and I kind of printed it out and sent it to a bunch of people I know last year. So if you haven't read it, "If" by Rudyard Kipling, I love it.
Finally, because I want to be respectful of everyone's time, we publicly announced this recently. You've joined the board of Silicon Slopes. So speak from that perspective on your view of this community, where we're headed, the future of Utah Tech, the future of Silicon Slopes, the ecosystem, what you'd like to see change, what you'd like to see continue, and just give a sense for that.
Yeah, I've never been more bullish on Silicon Slopes. There's so much talent here now. Like, even 5 or 10 years ago, if you needed a CFO that's taken a company public, there weren't any here. You had to go to the Bay Area. There's CFOs like that here now. There's CTOs, there's product folks, there's all the engineering talent you could ever want. There's UX people. So from a talent perspective, we're ready to really go to the next level. There's people, we process $60 billion a year of rent. So that kind of company didn't exist 20 years ago when I got started. So if you need specific talent, there's a really nice talent pool. Like I said, my focus in joining Silicon Slopes is, I think we just need to be better about a community as a community of sharing that. And that's something that the only reason I know what I know is I just went and asked lots of questions over several years to people who were willing, I don't know why, but they were willing to meet with me over and over. And I just was a sponge, and I had a million questions. And for those that may not be like me or may not want to do it that way, I do think that's where Silicon Slopes can step in and create environments like this where listen to people who've raised money on really bad terms. Let's not just hear about the people bragging about how great their round was. I'll tell you about really shitty money I've raised and that came back to bite me. So that's what I think we need to do a better job of, is how to build teams, how to build companies, how to raise money. And like I said, I think, again, if we can keep that kind of community connectiveness through it, so that none of us get too lost off the path of feeling alone and feeling like we're doing it, or we lose track of why we even started down the path in the first place, I think we're all going to be better for it.
Give it up for Adam. Thank you so much for coming, man.